Nobody likes being on a restrictive diet, and there's definitely the perception that it's not even successful, anyways. So, intuitive eating might sound like a much better approach. It certainly sounds more fun. But let's talk a little bit today about intuitive eating, what that means, how it's defined, and what the pros and the challenges are when it comes to this form of eating. Welcome to the Holy Well Journey podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Hodges. Join us for weekly faith-based conversations on holistic health to uncover practical tips for how to thrive and apply biblical wisdom to our busy modern lives. From fitness to food to fasting, we're here to discover what it means to have a healthy spirit, soul, and body. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We receive a lot of messages about how we should be eating, and some of that advice really seems to be conflicting. A lot of times it is that we're going on diets for weight loss because 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. And so that's a really valid concern. And along with that comes a host of other secondary health conditions, chronic health conditions, all that would be helped by a healthy diet in and of itself, but also helped by weight loss. So what is the actual success rate of diets? And this is just a general statement. This isn't a specific to keto or specific to calorie counting, but across the board, we see that about 2/3 of the weight lost in a diet is regained within a year. About 73% of that weight loss is regained within 3 years. And long term, when we're looking 5 years plus, about 20% of people who lose weight on diets are successful in maintaining that weight loss and keeping it off. Now, how they're able to do that, how they're able to maintain long-term success, that is a great topic for another day and another podcast. And another topic we're going to dive into more in next week is the difference in calorie counting versus macro counting. These are two very popular, very widespread methods of dieting, or maybe you don't want to use the word dieting, but just about defining and planning out your food intake. So we're going to talk about that next week. But this week, I really want to talk about just in general the idea of dieting versus intuitive eating. And dieting covers so many different types of plans. There is the calorie counting, there's the keto diet, there's the Atkins diet, there's the grapefruit diet and the juice cleanses and intermittent fasting and all of these different types of dieting methods. And at the end of the day, what they're all trying to do is to help you somehow control and define what you're eating for good health and weight loss outcomes. Now, sometimes the methods aren't sound. They're not good ways to do it. But what they all have in common is trying to restrict your food in some way. If it's keto diet, that means that you're eating more fat, very minimal protein, and really low carbs. Sometimes it helps people to just have that clarity that there's certain entire food groups that they're not going to eat. And that just helps them to have less decisions to make. And we all know that we have decision fatigue sometimes because there's so many options out there. Another way would be with intermittent fasting, where people have, or they sometimes call it time-restricted eating, where there's just a certain window of time during the day that you're going to eat. And there's been plenty of studies that have shown it's not necessarily more effective than other restrictive diet methods. It's just that for some people in their mindset, that works more easily for them to define how they're going to eat in that way. Now, these diets like keto and intermittent fasting, there's also going to be some evidence and scientific backing that they affect your body and your metabolism and how it burns fat, stored fat for energy in certain ways. So there is that too, but we're not going to go into all of that today. Again, we're going to talk about intuitive eating. And I first want to start out by defining what intuition means. What does it mean to be intuitive? And a general definition for this in life is being intuitive means having the ability to understand or know something without evidence or reasoning. Some other synonyms would be like instinctive, innate, spontaneous, and involuntary. And some would even say that intuition is a high form of intelligence because it's handling complexity and able to make decisions in the moment. So that would be intuition in general. And as you can certainly see that there'd be lots of situations where that would be helpful. It would be positive. But when we're talking about intuitive eating, sometimes people would think of it generally as listening to your body, listening to what your body wants, listening to what your body needs. But there's actually a whole book and organization around intuitive eating that outlines certain specific principles. So this is a very specific definition of intuitive eating that you may have heard or seen online or perhaps read the book. The Intuitive Eating book is in its 4th edition, and it was written by 2 registered dietitians. So here are the 11 principles of intuitive eating that I just want to run through quickly. Principle 1 is to reject diet culture. Principle 2 is to honor your hunger. The third one is making peace with food. And the fourth is discover the satisfaction factor. The fifth is feel your fullness. The sixth is challenge the food police. 7 is cope with your emotions with kindness. 8 is respect your body. 9 is movement, feel the difference. We're talking about exercise. And 10 is honor your health with gentle nutrition. So these are all great principles. I'm sure there's nothing that I just said that you're like, oh, that doesn't sound like a good idea to do, or that could have a negative effect. And in some ways, this can be summed up as mindful eating. Things like honoring your hunger, making sure that you're keeping your body adequately fed and making sure you're getting the right type of energy, the right types of nutrients. Also, discovering the satisfaction factor and feeling your fullness. Those are also about mindful eating. It's about being really in tune to your body as you eat, paying attention through the process so that you can stop when you're full. A lot of these principles have to do with your mindset around food, rejecting diet culture and food restriction. So diet culture can bring so much guilt around our food and eating habits. It can just be this constant voice in the back of our mind saying, well, maybe you shouldn't eat that, or you should feel guilty because you ate that. So there has to be this peace that we make with food and peace that we make with our bodies. These are all really healthy mindsets for us to be in when it comes to eating. Another one similar to the diet culture was in Principle 6 about challenging the food police. And that's about having all these rules about what you can and cannot eat. This happens to me all the time with people who know what I do. If I'm out at a party or I'm eating out and I'm having a cookie or something, like, I can't believe you're eating that, because they have this image that if I'm a person who's a health and fitness coach, if I'm into nutrition, then I would never eat any desserts or quote unquote bad foods. But that's not how we have to live our lives. There's no rules that say we have to eat exactly to the T every second of every day, or we're going to have bad results, or it's going to, ruin our health. No, we don't want to eat those things all the time, but there is room for that. There's room for those foods that taste good. Another big part of this intuitive eating is recognizing when your emotions are driving your eating. So that's where it might be even a little bit counterintuitive, because when you hear the word intuition or intuitive, you think sometimes that you're going with just your gut reaction, your gut feeling. But that's not the case. We don't want to just be blindly consuming food because we feel like it, because it's there in front of us, especially in the case when we're in a really heightened emotional state. And emotional eating and stress eating, they are very common. A lot of times people feel ashamed of those habits. They feel like that's something that they need to hide. But it's very important that you're able to talk to someone about that, whether it's a counselor or a health coach or somebody else, a personal friend in your life, somebody that you can trust. Because what we ultimately want to do is be recognizing those emotions, honoring those emotions, and finding ways to deal with them in a healthy way. Because there are repercussions to stuffing with unhealthy food. There are repercussions to that stress eating and mindless eating throughout the day. The other principle I want to point out that is so important is respecting your body. We know that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are created by God. And sometimes we come into a really antagonistic relationship with our body, with our self-image, and then therefore with food. And so it's very difficult to be reaching a goal to get a healthy and well body when we feel like we're in opposition to our body. When we feel like my body is against me, my body has these cravings, my body won't stop eating when it should. That's not going to get us where we want to go, because we are one being, body, soul, and spirit. Our body is not the enemy to us. We need to start first with just some gratitude and honor for our body in our journey to being wholly well. So that's not an easy thing to do. That's easier said than done, but it starts with just recognizing these different thoughts that we have about ourselves. We need to have a recognition of where we're having shame or where we're having blame when it comes to our health, when it comes to our eating in our bodies. So if you're interested more in this intuitive eating approach, I do encourage you to read the book, look at the resources. You can easily find YouTubes and podcasts and a lot of people talking about this intuitive eating approach, because it is a way to get a little bit healthier from the inside out as far as our mental and emotional state around eating, and also breaking free from diet culture. We also had a really, really great podcast episode with Carol Bevel about demolishing diet strongholds. And I'm going to link to that in the show notes because that's another one that you definitely want to go listen to if you feel like you're just trapped in this place where you can't get on a diet that actually works for you. You can't get on a diet that's actually sustainable. You don't want to be on a diet anymore. Yet at the same time, you need the results. You need the better health outcomes. You need the better eating habits. You need maybe some weight loss in your life. So all of this starts with first having this healthy mindset around food and around your body. But let's talk about some of the things that are challenging about intuitive eating or some misconceptions. And I already talked about one of them, which is just kind of a misconception that it means you just go with your gut and you eat whatever you feel like eating in as much as you want, whenever you want. So most of us do better when we have some boundaries and reminders. And I work with some clients that when they're really stressed, they eat a lot, and others who when they're really stressed, they don't eat at all. They forget to eat. And neither of those are good extremes because you need to have that healthy, regular nutrition coming in, fueling your body for good energy. So if you're someone that forgets to eat or has a problem with remembering to eat regularly, you might also just need that structure and need those reminders of what it looks like to have an healthy eating plan for your day. So what's challenging about just following your gut or following your intuition when it comes to eating is that, first of all, our portion sizes have gotten bigger and bigger. And this is true when we go to restaurants, certainly true of fast food meal sizes. Hopefully you've seen some of those pictures online that compare McDonald's fries in the 1950s to what they are today. Everything has gotten bigger in terms of portion size. So even if you've decided to treat yourself and you're going to grab a tasty snack, if it's a soft drink, if it's chips, if it's candy, that's not a little 8-ounce can of soda most of the time. It's going to be like a 20-ounce bottle for just one serving. Same applies to chips. And it'll even tell you on the bag, this is 3.5 servings. It isn't one serving. Yet what do? If we have one bag that's a reasonably small size, our minds naturally just want to finish the whole thing. So it's something that we need to be really conscious of when it comes to our eating is what are the portion sizes of what I'm eating. The second is just our general food environment and access to food. There's food everywhere all the time. So if you're at work and there's a break room that's full of food, then when you're bored, you're definitely going to want to go and grab something to munch on. And the same can be true if you're a work from home person. The break room is your kitchen and it's right there. And so if you have all of this food on hand that's less nutritious, that's empty calories, that's mega processed, then that's going to be something that you're really having to have a lot of self-control and a lot of willpower. And for so many of us, it's just better to keep healthy boundaries in mind so that the food that is around us is healthy food options. So then we're not relying on willpower. We're not having to resist temptation all day, every day. And that's within our homes and workplace, but also just being aware that it's become so easy to drive through and grab a coffee, stop in and grab a smoothie, which might sound like a healthy food. But again, if you look at the portion sizes and you look at what's actually in that smoothie, there may be tons of sugar in there. So remember that the food that you prepare at home and whole foods are going to be better for you. And that brings me to a third point of what's challenging when it comes to intuitive eating as far as just following intuition, thinking about what we want to eat. So think about a kid's menu. What does a kid's menu have on it at a restaurant? It's typically like cheeseburger, chicken nuggets, pizza, I don't know, maybe tacos, maybe something else. But those are the big three. It's the chicken nuggets, the pizza, the cheeseburger, maybe the mac and cheese. So they don't even bother to put like tilapia with broccoli on the kids' menu because no kid wants to pick that. And as adults, we're really not so different, right? We want the foods that are palatable. We want the foods that are so tasty to us. And you've probably heard about ultra-processed foods, about just processed foods versus whole foods in general. And I just want to speak to this because I think it's important because these manufactured foods, they are manufactured specifically to make us crave more and more. And they're just triggering our brains in a way that when we get that taste and when we get the chemicals that come along with it, we say, I want more of that. So unprocessed foods are whole foods and they're in their natural state. Minimally processed foods might be foods that are slightly altered, but we haven't added extra ingredients because most foods are processed, right? So like a sliced apple, it's processed because you chopped it. There could be other things like just washing it, slicing, peeling, shredding. Frozen foods might be in that category as well, or like a bagged salad that has all the stuff already in it. So then we get on to processed foods, which means that the natural state has been altered in some ways, but there's still those core ingredients that maintain some of those nutrients. Processing food might just include things like cooking or fermenting or dehydrating. And so there could still be plenty of foods in that category, like maybe a smoked fish or something like tofu, whole wheat breads, yogurts. Those are still things that are going to be part of our diet. Ultra processed foods are those that have been taken apart and they've gone through a major industrial process. And then they're combined with other foods or ingredients, extracts, preservatives, modified oils, chemical sweeteners, other additives, and all of these other ingredients make the foods very palatable, and they make it convenient. They make them lower cost and able to be stored on the shelf for a really long time. But these ultra processed foods are the ones we really have to watch because they can be so easy to consume them in huge quantities and not be getting much nutritional value out of our foods, and also then just craving more and more of them. So how can we bring these two ideas together? If we want to get out of the dieting mindset and out of the dieting approach, but we know that intuitive eating might be too wide and too broad for us. Maybe we need a little bit more definition and clarity and some boundaries in place. Well, I want to go back to that definition of intuition. Just the general definition of being intuitive is being able to know something without evidence or reasoning. So if you know that, if you're a naturally inclined person to want to eat healthy, then probably you have good health outcomes. Probably you're at a healthy level of weight. But reasoning and evidence can be good things. So with that approach, we do want to take the good parts out of intuitive eating where we're transforming our mindset that there are no good or bad foods, that we don't have to be on a diet, that we don't need to feel guilty or shameful about food. All of those are great mindset approaches to have. But then at the same time, maybe we need a little bit of evidence and a little bit of reasoning. Part one of that would be educating yourself on food and nutrition. This might be something that you do on your own through reading. It might be something you already do know a lot about. Now, it can be really difficult to sort through what seems to be really conflicting advice, and that's where a health coach can come in. That's what I like to do with people, is help to get it boiled down and really simple and give practical steps for people to improve how they're eating. So that's also a lifelong investment that you need to make, is that you're going to continually invest in learning more about nutrition. There's all kinds of things we might know about. There might be hobbies that we have, but nutrition is important for everyone, not just for dietitians and for health coaches, because we eat every day. So we need to educate ourselves, not just about what is a good diet approach, but about the actual foods that we're eating. We want to know what foods are high in protein, what foods are high in carbohydrates or fats. What's the difference between the different types of fats? What is it about omega-3s in salmon and fatty fishes that's so good for us, and why? Why do we need that? So this is something that, again, you don't need to learn it overnight. You don't need to do a crash course on it, but just make sure that you're continually investing in educating yourself about nutrition and how to eat. The reasoning part of this, then I would say the second part is being aware of what you're eating. Okay, so that does come in with the mindfulness in general, but then to really know accurately, because like I said, we're surrounded by food. So we may be just grabbing things here and there, and the portion sizes have gotten so big. And that's where it can be really helpful for a time to be measuring your food intake and measuring it by logging it. You can log it on paper, but even better, there are so many apps right now. Lose It, MyFitnessPal, all kinds of apps out there where you can track your food, which goes hand in hand with education. When you track it, then you're able to see, okay, this portion size has this many calories, it has this type of nutritional content. Hey, these sweet potatoes, they're really high in vitamin A, that's good for me. So by measuring and tracking, you will have a much better idea of what you're eating and whether it's in the right amount. It's not something you have to do all the time everywhere. You don't have to carry a food scale with you everywhere you go. But for a period of time, if you do it, then you will learn how to eyeball portion sizes. You will learn what the right amount is. And then the final part of that evidence and reasoning, I would say, is to study yourself, and study yourself from like a third person perspective. So you don't feel wrapped up in the emotion or the justification of it, but just see, what does this person do? I'm talking about this person that's me. Is she in the habit of skipping breakfast? Is she in the habit of grabbing fast food for lunch because she's too busy, or maybe even just having a snack at her desk and eating in front of the computer? Is she eating when she's upset? Or is it because when she's really happy, she actually wants to celebrate? Just figure out what these patterns are, because there's a big difference between following your intuition and being stuck in a pattern. And you won't know that unless you take that step back to just observe yourself. And again, without any judgment, without any criticism, without trying to justify, but just observe what those patterns are and then be honest with yourself. Is this serving me? Is this healthy? Is this what I should be doing? From there, you can create a strategic plan and partner it hand in hand with the education you have about nutrition, with the measurement and the accuracy of knowing what you're eating, and then knowing the goals that you are trying to get to. You can create a great plan for yourself for how you eat and make that a habit, so that it's not something you're having to think about constantly and have in the back of your mind, but it just becomes your habit of how you eat and how you do that. And so again, that's a big part of coaching. That's a big part of what I'm passionate about doing. If that's something that you think could be a help to you, that would be of interest to you, you can go to my website, stephaniechhodges.com, and see a little bit more about the coaching opportunities that are there. So I hope this has been helpful to you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a second to leave a rating or review on Apple or Spotify, wherever you're listening to this. It helps so much to get the show visible and in front of more people. I hope you have a great day, and come back next week for part 2. We're going to talk about the differences in calorie counting versus macro counting. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Wholly Well Journey podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, and you can also head over to wholywelljourney.com to check out the show notes and the whole podcast library. That's also where you'll find information about our health and wellness coaching, which you can participate in online from wherever you are in the world. Just a reminder and disclaimer that this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Please be sure to consult your doctor before making any changes to your diet or exercise plan or starting to fast. If you're interested in more information about fasting and spiritual disciplines, check out danielfastjourney.com. Thanks for joining us on this journey to becoming wholly well.